Last week we dropped the rusty subframe off the E38, disassembled all of the front suspension and sprayed myself in the face with some chemicals. This week I'm going to dress like a Temu Darth Vader and we're going to remove 29 years of rust and grime from these destroyed suspension components, turning them into this. But we do have a bit of a problem. It's not going to be an easy task because every single one of these components is utterly wrecked. Everyone has already told me that most of these parts should go in the bin, that they're beyond saving. 29 years of rust, road salt and neglect have left the BMW suspension and subframes looking absolutely destroyed. I guess most people would replace it. However, I'm going to gamble that I could save these components, get all of the rust off them and restore them back to almost factory condition. If I don't manage to do that, unfortunately I'm going to waste days and days of work and effort trying to clean up parts and then have to buy new parts anyway. And with so many projects lying around, we already know that's money that I just can't afford. Well, the oil's done a pretty good job of protecting some parts of this subframe, but not all of it, so we've got quite a bit of work to do to try and get this. Now, I'm not going to have a blast cabinet that's big enough to fit this in anyway, so we're going to have to do as much as we can with a wire wheel and treat the rest of this and see where we get to. And even with the various wheels and attachments on the angle grinder and drill, this is just such an awkward shape to get into. The subframe's got lots of bracketry all over it and little clips and areas that are tucked away, which means getting all of that rust out is hard. The next job is this anti-roll bar, which, although not in terrible condition, certainly isn't great. There's some pitting and lots of flaky paint. So this is going to need sanding back as much as possible to try and get an even flat surface. I'm going to do this a different colour to the subframe so that when it goes in there's a little bit of visual contrast that hopefully makes the underside look a bit more premium. I set about doing what I thought were the worst components, which were these hub knuckles. These were in a real state through 29 years of salt and road grime in the UK. Now, I didn't think these would clean up, but I hit these with the knotted wheel, and after many hours, we got to this stage here. So we've taken off a big chunk of the corrosion, but there's still a lot to get off, and it's all in those really difficult to reach corners. But I need to get as much of this off as I can before I get these into the blast cabinet. Wire brushes on the drill, so let's see. Now, I've got these semi-prepared for blasting, but I've done one more than the other one, so I've got to mask these up to protect them when they're in the sandblaster. I don't want to pit all of these fresh surfaces here for obvious reasons, so just going to tape these up, put them in the sandblaster, and then let that work its magic. I should have hit this harder with the knotted wheel before I started, would have been a little bit easier, but I didn't, so yeah, it's going to take a little while to get this off. And many millennium of blasting later, we've still got work to do. This one's not quite there. This one, however, is looking pretty good and is almost ready for paint. And you've got to remember, paint won't adhere to rust and dirt, so we've got to get these even cleaner than they are now. And whilst I'm in the mood for blasting, I might as well try and clean up some of these nuts and bolts as well. And they look loads better, but I've still got more work to do on the hubs. And with the hubs finally cleaning up nicely, it's time to move on to the subframe, where I've sanded this and degreased it and prepared it. It's time to get a coat of Hydrate 80 on to try and convert any of that remaining rust. And I'm not layering this on, I'm trying to brush it in and just push it into the little dimples to make sure we get full coverage. So I've left the Hydrate 80 to dry overnight, and as you can see, this has gone pretty dark, which means that that's a nice stable surface. However, some of these parts are not as smooth as I would like, and I need to sand this anyway to key the surface to allow the primer to stick to it. The biggest problem that I'm having with all of these components is that every single one is taking far longer to smooth out than I hoped it would. And as much as I need to pick up the pace, I also need to avoid missing things like this, which is just going to slow me down even further. And I think that watching me sanding random pieces of metal is probably not going to be that interesting, so I think I'll skip ahead a little bit. So it's approaching 1 in the morning and I've just put some built amber on this first coat, and you can see it's already starting to react. Excuse my voice, it's really late, I'm still not very well, but I've got to get this done. It's a really sunny day today and I've got a bit of free time, so I'm going to try and lay some paint down onto some of these suspension components. So I'm going to start with doing the hubs. I'm going to mask those up and we're going to paint them with a 2K epoxy primer, and then when that's dry I'm going to put a 2K top coat, which is going to be a satin finish over the top of it, so you can still see the cast and it doesn't look too glossy. And then the subframe we're going to do in a gloss with a 2K primer and a 2K gloss top coat, so you can see the difference between the components and build up some texture and layering into the suspension. Let's go. God, it's so nice today, look at this. Perfect painting weather. This is where all the hard work finally starts to pay off. A few days ago these parts looked like they've been dragged out of a scrapyard, but now they're clean, bare metal and almost ready for primer. It's amazing what 30 years of wear and tear can do in terms of rust, and it's even more satisfying watching it disappear. Now that I've got all the small parts together, I need to give them one final wipe down with IPA to make sure we've got no residue or dirt or anything sticking to them. I've then got to figure out how to hang these up and get them into a position where I can spray all the way around them evenly. You've got to remember, I'm not a professional painter, but I do want to get the best results that I possibly can. So for this 2K primer we've got a grey epoxy primer, we've got a hardener and we've got a thinner. And I've read the spec sheet on this and it's a 2-to-1 plus 10%, so it's 2 of this, 1 of this and 10% of the thinner. Gun is pretty much ready to go. It's a 1.8 tip on this. Got these things kind of hanging, not got as many ways to hang this as I actually needed, to be fair, but I didn't intend to paint all of this today. But it would be on madness not to unleash the gun when the weather is as nice as it is outside. Now I still haven't figured out how I'm going to get the ARB painted in this current situation. I need to juggle that, but everything's pretty much set up and now I just need to mix up the epoxy primer. At the moment I am fully suited, so because this is going to get everywhere, and even though I'm not a health and safety guy, I actually got a mask because those isocyanates, well, they're not very nice, and really you should have an air-fed mask, but this will do for now. And paint mixing is still a skill that I'm definitely working on. 2 parts of epoxy. We now need 1 part of hardener, so let's do that now. We are good to go. So we've got a couple of layers on these now. These are looking pretty good. Primer's settling in quite nice, so that is one good thing. So what I've got to do now is I'm going to put a 3rd layer on, just because I've made a bit of a cock up. Because I didn't hang this ARB properly, I actually ended up scraping the ARB, and I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to get away with it, but I scraped it on this frame, so I'm going to put another layer on that just to build it up a little bit more. I'm going to try and put a little bit of top coat onto the hubs, and we're going satin black. There we go. So we've got the satin black, we've got the hardener and some thinners ready to roll. So I'm going to hand you over to the professional, highly professional camera woman for today, Snake. So obviously Snake is injured Snake. Paint all over the lid.
And you got it all over the floor and yourself.
Thanks, Nate, for reminding me of my many mistakes. Some of you might have spotted that I didn't use any filters to filter the paints, I didn't have any, and it's just suspension parts. With it being a hot day, I'd hoped that that would help set this paint a little bit harder and a little bit faster, but that might not have been the case. I tried to layer on a couple of coats and I'm looking for a satin finish, and already I can see that this looks a little bit more glossy than I anticipated it would. And I wasn't entirely happy, so I ended up having to repaint these again. Shot blasted these again, and although not perfect, these are good enough for me to actually paint, so I'm going to try and lay a little bit of paint down on them. At the moment the compressor keeps tripping, so we just don't have enough pressure. I'm going to let that build. The gun's set at 29 psi. Keeping the GoPro out of the way, the other day I literally painted this GoPro grey with overspray, and this one's Snake's GoPro, so she wasn't too happy with me. But yeah, I'm going to finish putting some more black onto this. Let's go. I'm not quite sure what I did with that. I must have either picked up the wrong paint or the wrong spec sheet, but this definitely is looking a bit better. So there's two coats on this. This one's a little bit glossier again, you know, but it's still, actually, that looks nice. Just putting a bit more on this, just for protection, as much as anything else, and coverage. I'll put one more coat on maybe, and probably one more coat on these, and they should be done. I've also put another coat onto these, which go at the end of the chassis rails, and like I said yesterday, I have bought new ones of these, so I don't really need to do that, but I've got to keep the new ones, and I've got to put these back on the car. I think they look pretty good, to be fair. To say how battered they actually were, they were pretty messed up, and they actually look all right. I think they're going to look good when they're on the car. And again, now we've got the hubs, we've got the repair to do on this dust cover, got the little brackets from the brake pipes, I think it is. We've got the chassis rails, and we've got the ARB painted, so we've made some pretty decent progress. Also got the subframe on the bench, which is getting prepared. I really should have taken more rust off, but this just does not fit in my blast cabinet, so I can't fully blast this, which is annoying. Do you want to do a piece of camera?
Sure.
That's not really a piece of camera, that's just putting a weird face. Getting to the stage where I can put primer onto the subframe feels really exciting. I can't wait to see what this is going to look like finished in gloss black. It's the main component, and when that's contrasted with the colour that I'm putting onto the ARB, I think it's going to look absolute fire. And being able to lay some of these components out whilst they're drying and take a look at them is also really exciting. They just look so much better. I can't believe how they've come out compared to where they started. Weather has been nice, so I'm outdoors and I'm getting some gloss 2K onto this subframe. Oh, let me do a little camera cheeky flick. I've tried to lay the paint on this really wet so that I get as much gloss out of this subframe as I possibly can. Remember guys, I'm not a professional painter, I'm still learning how to do this myself. And I'm fortunate that two friends of mine, Lee and Andy, gave me some great advice on how to paint this and get the best result. There's so many little nooks and crannies on this subframe that I was worried about getting in there, but with a bit of practice with the gun and changing the fan pattern, I was able to get pretty decent coverage, and I think it looks amazing. I'm really proud of how this has come out. If we had a big blast cabinet, I think we could have prepared this subframe even better still, but we didn't. And I think for the amount of hours that we've got in this is a great result. Let me show you a flashback to how it looked at the start. And thanks to the magic of YouTube, you don't have to watch this, we can teleport back over to the E38 because I've got to start restoring those inner arches. We've got some rust spots in there. Now, I'm not going to take off all of the undercoat because the stuff that BMW put on has lasted for 27, 28 years on this car. The areas where it's worn away and there's rust coming through, I'm going to take those away with a poly disc on the angle grinder, and then I'm going to treat it with some rust remover and rust converters. This is as much access as I'm going to have without taking anything else off, but I can get to the places where the subframe mounts to the chassis of the car. So I'm going to grind all that back to bare metal so we've got a clean surface. I'm then going to move on to the arches, and we're going to take away any of the underseal where there's rust coming through, and also some of the seam sealer. The aim is to try and get as much rust away without having to strip all of the arch. Even with the tools that we've got going on here, there still will be some pitting, so it's back to our old friend Hydrate 80, which will get brushed onto that to try to convert that into a stable surface. And of course, being an absolute imbecile, I also managed to cut through the strap that was holding up the steering box in the middle of doing all of this. What an absolute muppet. Actually managed to nick the strap that I'm using to support the steering box. And the next decision was trying to decide how much of the original underseal to remove. I wanted to get as much of this rust away as possible, but obviously it takes time to get into all of the pits once you're taking this back to bare metal. Still going away at these pits, as you can see, and trying to get into them where the dark areas are. That's still active rust, so trying to get as much of that away as I can. You can see down here we've still got a little bit. What I actually find for this sometimes is the brass brushes on the drill kind of bend and flex a little bit more, so you can kind of get in and hopefully eat away at it, and fingers crossed that's going to look a little bit better. So I've got the first coat of Hydrate 80 going onto these bits that I've taken back, well, as far back to bare metal as I possibly can, and these were the bits that were showing the most amount of rust. And whilst it might not look like I've taken a lot of material away here, that rust would have got significantly worse had I have left it, especially with UK winters. And I'm going to talk to you about this product pretty quickly. Built Hamber. Honestly, this is one of the best brands on the marketplace, not just for restorations, but also for detailing. These products are absolutely solid. This Hydrate 80 is a rust converter. It's not a rust remover, it's a rust converter. This takes rust and makes it into a very stable surface. So it takes away all the moisture and everything else. Rust can't get to it, oxygen can't get to it, and without that, rust cannot get any further. The plan with the 7 Series is to paint the arches first of all with a 2K primer over the top of that Hydrate 80, and then obviously what we're going to do is put a Gravitex top coat over that primer, and that's going to provide all the abrasion resistance, etc. I'm going to try and shoot it out of a normal paint gun, so I'm going to have to add maybe 10-15% thinners into it to get it down, and I'm going to have to really heat it up, and that's why the temperature is a problem today. At 5-6 degrees it's just really cold. It's been curing for 20 hours now. I'm going to leave it a little bit longer just to make sure that that is as cured off as it can possibly be. I've just unscrewed these here so that this should just literally pull out of here now, like that, and then I've got better access to paint all the way into this edge here. So I'm going to clean this up and just clean into these corners. But of course, before we even think about doing any type of paint, we've got some more cleaning to do, and then I can jump into the masking. And this takes a little while, but I'll show you a few tips. Just gonna wrap this as much around the back as I can, and I'm gonna pull this away when I'm spraying it so that I get as much behind there as possible. I've already kind of rubbed down the back of it a little bit. Chuck that out of the way. A good trick here, by the way, is to use tin foil to mask these brake lines, and the reason that I use tin foil is simply because it's easy to get off the masking tape after you've painted it, and these are quite fiddly, and it'll do just as good a job, and it's cheap. Well, I said that I wasn't going to go any further, but I've decided to take away this plastic wiring as much as possible to get really behind here, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit further. As you can see, this particular bolt, where is it? There we go. That is, yeah, it's game over for that, so we're going to have to cut that one off. I'll try and hammer something really small onto it, because just will not budge at the moment. And yeah, but everything actually down the back of there is still pretty clean rust-wise. As you can see, there's maybe a couple of little bits appearing here, but look how tiny that is compared to my fingernail. Get that out in a little bit, but I need to just try and position this and see how far behind I can get and what I actually have to disconnect and what I can leave connected. I just can't leave it alone, and I can't leave the car alone either. So the issue that I've got is that I keep just going a little bit further, and I'm gonna have to rein this in. I really am going to have to stop it, because right now I keep creating more work, and you know, okay, you look and you think this is going to be an extra half an hour, but if I do that 10 times, that's an extra 10 half hours. And I think if my maths are correct, that's an extra 5 hours. Yes. So an extra 5 hours is quite a lot. And if I do that every week, then that's an extra 20 hours a month, which is 240 hours a year. And that's a lot of time. Getting behind these is actually really difficult, even with this. And I've pulled this one away so that I can actually get in a little bit easier. But because these are, you know, dual lines next to each other, it's really difficult to roll the tape around them or roll the foil around them, and that's causing me problems. So it's taken me quite a while to try and get this masked up. And so I've just taken off some of these little ladder clips which go onto these, and as you can see, there's a little bit of rust on there. So whilst I'm here, I'm just going to clean these up with a wire wheel on the Dremel. And as I spend most of the day masking up little bits of wire and cabling, I've come to the conclusion that I'd have been better stripping all of this off. I think it would have been faster, but that's what happens when you're an idiot and maybe you're trying to be a little bit lazy. My own fault. This is really not what I wanted today. It's really not ideal. Hopefully the arches are going to stay dry in there. British weather, thank you so much, I love you. But fortunately, despite that setback, we were blessed a few days later with some nice weather, and I managed to finish masking the rest of the car. So I'll just show you my setup. This connector straight into the hose. We've got this little water trap, pressure, and then straight into the gun. So I'm going to be controlling the pressure on the gun here. I'm going to set this to about 28, 29 psi. And the wind's picking up, unfortunately, so I'm going to try and crack on and see if I can get a little bit of paint on. But as you can hear, I was having a real air leak problem with the gun, something wrong somewhere. But the wind was picking up and I didn't really have time to try to fix this, so I decided to try and get this tack coat on anyway and hope that once I put some wet coats over the top of it, we would be okay and good to go. I've got this side to do now, and then once that's done, I've got obviously 15-20 minutes flash off time depending on the sun and where it's hitting, and then obviously I've got another coat to do, so it's going to be 2 coats of 2K primer, and then again we're going to leave this side overnight and it should be ready tomorrow for the Gravitex. At this point I was still battling some gun issues, despite the fact that I'd got a bunch of connectors and 2 different airlines available to me, but I didn't really have time to mess about. I really had to try and get some primer onto these arches whilst I got the opportunity. We've got the second coat on in here. And despite the issues with the gun, this is looking really good. We've got a couple of coats on now, and I'm really pleased. We've got a little bit of overspray onto the engine mount. That's getting changed anyway, I can deal with that later on. And the gun is still dripping paint on the floor. Not figured out at this stage what was going on with the gun, but managing to get coats down onto the car anyway, and still really happy. One issue that I didn't consider though was it being a gravity fed gun. Trying to point the tip upwards to spray into here was a little bit problematic if you didn't have enough paint actually in the gun itself. So we're now 24 hours later, and now this paint is all gassed out. I think it looks absolutely amazing, and this is just primer. And now I really can't wait to get the Gravitex on for all that protection. Let's get to it. And I've got to decide exactly how I'm going to spray this in here, because obviously it's a pretty confined space as a wheel arch and Gravitex really shoots out. So I'm going to use, I was going to use a smaller tip, but I'm going to use a 1.8 tip. I'm not going to use a Schultz gun because that goes everywhere. I'm going to use a 1.8 primer gun. I'm going to probably have the PSI at about 40. I'm going to narrow the fan pattern down a little bit so I've got a bit more control, and I'm probably going to have the fluid set about 3 turns out from fully closed. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to hold it probably 12, 14, 16 inches away and try and control it in. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do the whole arch. I'm going to keep it a little bit more OEM. If you see, there's more texture here, which are these exposed bits, and then there's less coming into here. So I guess I'll see how it looks when I start to apply it. So I've got a pretty much standard gun setup going on here. This is a 1.8 tip primer, and we're going to put the Gravitex in with this with about 5 or 10% thinners. I've had the Gravitex outside in the sun for a little while to thin it out, and I'm going to set the pressure initially probably at around 30 psi. Sometimes it does recommend to go higher, and I might do, but we're going to see, check the fan pattern a little bit. I'm going to try and narrow that down just a touch so they've got a bit more control in these arches, and that's going to be my plan of action. I'm really looking forward to getting this on and seeing what it looks like, trying to get that OEM style texture but a bit more protection. I've also masked up a little bit more because I just don't want Gravitex everywhere. It's not something that I can easily get off, so I've tucked away into these corners a little bit. So if you've not used this before, basically this is a underbody coating that's textured. Basically you can paint over the top of it, so it's really hard wearing, really chip resistant, and it's going to really make sure that on top of that 2K primer we've got a really impervious surface that's going to last quite a long time. Now, as excited as I was to lay down the Gravitex into the arches, got to admit I was also a little bit nervous right now as well. Although I've shot Gravitex out of a Schultz gun before, I've not shot one out of a spray gun in this way, and I was really concerned about how I was going to manage the texture and try to get it looking how I wanted it to look. And unfortunately I did find that I was getting a little bit of a problem. So I'm having a few problems here, which is the longer that I use the gun, the more clogged up it's getting. So I finished doing the arches with the Gravitex, and it was a little bit of a battle because after putting on the first coat on the first arch, the gun basically got blocked. I had 5% thinners in there, added some more thinners. I still couldn't quite get it to work, so I had to go disassemble the gun, clean it all out, and then come back and do it again. And I've tried to blend this in places, so I've tried to put a heavier texture into the centre section, which is the most exposed, where the arch liner doesn't cover, and I've done that using the Schultz gun, and then I've used the Gravitex from the 1.8 primer gun to blend it into the other bits. So this is what it looks like. I'll try and show you. And with the Gravitex fully dry, we can now go and spray the Biarritz blue. Well, managed to get the base coat on. So I'll just talk you through quickly what I'm doing with the clear coat. So I've got this Pro XL clear coat, which is a 2:1 ratio. This is the clear, whatever it is, clear plus. There is another one which recommended to use if you've got ovens, but I'm going to use this. Obviously we've got an activator or a hardener or whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to use a little bit of this matting agent as well, just to give a shout out to the guys from Magic Paints. They're based in Cold Heselden in the northeast. If you are in the northeast and you want some paints, these guys are really, really good. Price is great, and incredibly friendly guys, yeah, so just give those guys a call. But before I show you what it looks like with the clear coat on, let me show you a few photos of where we first started. And these look absolutely amazing, and it's been so much work just to even get to this stage, but it makes me so happy that this E38 is on the road to recovery. This subframe represents a little victory on the road to redemption for this E38. We are slowly proving that this E38 is not beyond saving, and that actually with some hard work we can make this car good again and get this back on the road. And that is it for today's episode on the E38. Now I'm going to be waiting for a few suspension parts for this car, so next week we may well get a new project car. But if you want to see more of the E38, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button and leave a comment below. And of course, if you want to see what's coming next week, then you better subscribe anyway. See you in the next one.